Hey, Matt, it's great to see you.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your time, particularly the subject matter in terms of why you and I are speaking. It's sort of weird for me to say this, but I've been struggling with the topic of racism and how we should cover it on ChannelE2E and how our site can help to be one of the voices that moves us forward as a conversation. And one of the things that really helped me actually was your blog about the killing of George Floyd and racism in America. And you mentioned that, I'm going to read the quote exactly. I think you mentioned that you tend to be very measured about commenting at work about broader social issues. And that describes me, and I'm not even dealing with it in like the immense way that I'm sure you and others have been dealing with it. So in terms of from your vantage point, what inspired you to write the blog and try to move the conversation forward?
You know, good question, Joe. What sort of motivated me was the pain and the feedback and outreaches I was getting from people at my company. There were many of them who were deeply disturbed by what they saw and wanted to know, what do we as a company stand for around this? And I certainly think some of it had to do with the fact that I'm a Black man who's a CEO of a Silicon Valley company.
Yeah.
And they felt that my sort of role and using this platform to make a comment was really important. And so as you mentioned, I tend to be measured about these things. We all come to work with different perspectives, different life experiences, and try not to judge anybody's sort of political and affiliations, et cetera. But at the same time, I think that what I wanted to sort of lay out there is that, hey, my dad was a cop.
Yeah.
I know many cops and great people. When my dad passed away, um, many of them showed up, and it was a true brotherhood and friendship. And so I know that side. And then I also am aware of the fact that I've had friends, who have had experiences with police officers. And so I felt there was some sense of trying to create some balance. Yes, there are some bad apples, but there are a lot of also good apples. And also the fact that, hey, we as a company are obviously about shareholder value and those types of things. But as a CEO and as a technology company, it's also about all stakeholders, our
Yeah.
communities, our shareholders, our customers, our employees. And so all of that put together said, hey, we need to lend our voice to this effort and cause.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you lend your voice, I've been reading and listening to a lot of the coverage as well from third party media. And one of the things that caught my ear was there was a podcast on Bloomberg Radio, and the statement went something like this, and it was respectful of companies that are making statements. Number one, uh, against racism and just saying, we got to move forward, folks, and eradicate this once and for all. And then number two, I think the statement was respectful of companies that are making donations and others to social causes. But the podcast also made the point that, hey, it's not just enough to write a check this time around. We have to make sure that all of us are involved in addressing racism, period. And that really got me thinking in terms of what could companies be doing? What should companies be doing? Not only the big ones, the big Silicon Valley titans, but the small businesses such as mine. Do you have any thoughts there in terms of what we should all be doing potentially, beyond the obvious, so to speak?
Courage. I think that asking the right questions, not sitting back in silence. When you show up to work tomorrow and you look around, ask yourself, gee, you know, why are we not diverse?
Yeah.
And just asking the question, I think, starts to create some level of accountability with the people in those organizations. I'm reminded of Rosa Parks and and she didn't want to get up off her seat on the bus. What not often talked about was the fact that after that, many of the Black citizens in Alabama stopped riding the public transportation.
Hmm.
And so what ended up happening, they started to realize that, oh, we're going to go out of business. A great deal of our constituency were these Black citizens in Alabama. And so it was the action by the bus company to say, we got to integrate this. We got to treat people with some respect. So in some sense, the social protest can help businesses do the right sorts of things. It has to go beyond just the performative actions of a statement we align with Black Lives Matter or whatever it may be. But business could actually lead the way in helping to create a more just society by being more inclusive, by being more open-minded, by addressing the systematic racism that does exist, in their institutions. So I'm encouraged. I think that what a lot of us can do is just ask the questions,
Yeah.
be accountable, have the courage that you're doing the right thing.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another thought that comes to mind is as we look ahead to boardroom meetings and things like that, the quarterly meetings, maybe even they're monthly, I don't know, you tell me, but I know you sit on a lot of different boards, and without naming names in terms of those boards, in your experience historically, do you think we were making progress ahead of the killing of George Floyd, and then now this inflection point and everyone taking action and trying to move us forward? Do you think we'll see better activity at the boardroom level in terms of addressing and stomping out racism?
I think so. I'm much more optimistic. So I sit on a few company public boards, and those companies have been very forward thinking around diversity, gender, and racial. The overall representation is pretty dismal in America. And I think now any board member who sits on any public company board must be asking themselves these questions. What are we doing as a corporation to create a much more inclusive environment? Do we have representation on our own board? And what's important though, Joe, here is that I don't think people are not asking for companies to lower their standards. What they're asking is to invite other people with different perspectives to the table. And there's sometimes a mindset that, well, gee, now they want us to put Black people, on the board. That means some qualified white male is going to not get that opportunity. That's nonsense. There are many qualified women, people of color, who have earned the experiences to sit on these boards, but have never been given the opportunity because sometimes people are just not comfortable with that difference. So I think now anybody on any board, if they're not sitting there asking themselves this question, then you know that person doesn't need to be on your board, because that person is not responding to the social changes that are taking place in America and around the world.
Mm-hmm. That's the boardroom level discussion, and thank you for that context. What about the small business context? So prime example would be a lot of our readers are VARs and MSPs in the small business market, might be local businesses, regional businesses. Do you think the small businesses at a local level have a responsibility here, and what can we potentially do? Myself included as a small business co-owner.
I absolutely think so. I think that, hey, the world is changing, and that you're going to be selling, talking, partnering with people who perhaps don't look like you. And you have to have some experience and some understanding of how to work with differences and people who bring something different to the party than yourself. So I think the answer is that yes, small businesses can. In fact, when you look at people of color, many of them start small businesses.
Hmm.
And so there is, a natural alliance to, as a small business, to want to align yourself with, these other folks who are starting businesses. When you look at immigrants coming to the country, maybe, 100 years ago, many of the immigrants who came to the country came from Italy or from Ireland. Well, today, they're coming from Mexico and Africa and all these other places, India. And so having experiences, knowing how to interact with these people makes a lot of good sense. And not only just from a personal standpoint, but from a business standpoint for you as a small business owner. Those
Yeah.
are going to be your future customers. Those are your customers that you need to understand, and you should have people on your staff that understand how to work with folks from these different types of backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to put it in my context, I'm 50 now, and if we were having this
You look good
conversation.
though.
Yeah.
You look like you're 25. So
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, if we were having this conversation when I was 30, my viewpoint might have been, hey, well, listen, I did a call for resumes, and all I got was inquiries from, white college kids who graduated from X college. Fast forward 20 years, um, I've been educated in terms of like, where am I looking? Like, am I casting a wider net to go find the best of the best, regardless of background? So maybe it's a different set of colleges I'm looking at, or a different set of regions that I'm looking at. And to your point, go find the best of the best, but think about where you're recruiting from, I think is a key point here, isn't it?
it really is. I mean, you get a lot. This is actually one of the issues with tech companies.
Hmm.
There's a tendency of believing that the best and the brightest only attend this finite small group of colleges.
Right.
But any of us who've been around long enough, who are over 50, realize that.
Well, I'm just 50. I'm not
Okay,
over 50.
but so a little older than you, but you
Yeah.
realize that people come to this from different backgrounds. Not everybody needs to graduate from Harvard and Yale, and everybody who goes to those schools are not necessarily the best and the brightest. The best of the brightest come in various shades and educational backgrounds, etc. It's sort of like sports. If you're a baseball owner or a general manager or you're not just going to go look at um, one school.
Right.
You're going to go right. I mean, you watch the NFL. You look at when some of these guys play. It's like they played at some no-name college, but somehow they found that person, right?
Yeah.
And so talent is across the board, and it resides in different areas. You just have to be open-minded enough to want to go pursue that. Not everybody needs to go to Duke, Harvard Business School. That's not the only formula of what success needs to look like. And by the way, that's absent of color.
Right.
It's in general. There are lots of folks, lots of kids who go to various colleges, and sometimes they just need to be given a shot in
Right.
life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, my closing question is more of a comment than a
Yeah.
question, and I just wanted to thank you for your time and actually read from the closing paragraph of your blog. You mentioned this quote from Bishop Desmond Tutu, and he said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." And that's why I did the podcast with you. It was like I have to make sure that although I don't have the personal life experiences of what a lot of people are suffering through right now with the racism, I at least have to turn the microphone around to those who can really make sure we move it forward. So thank you for helping me just sort of turn the microphone around and make sure we're moving it forward in terms of Channel E2E's audience. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, John. I'll close on this note then. People have asked me, what can I do?
Right.
Right? And sometimes there's always this thought process that, it's these big things but it's really the small things. And it's the small things like when you're with friends and family, and you've heard the comments from people of what they may say about other people. Do you turn the other cheek? Or do you have the courage to say, hey, don't say that? When you're in a meeting and they're considering hiring people, do you say, I like Bob, this white guy, because, he reminds me of me. I don't like this guy over here because, because he's black or he may not be the right fit. What kind of language do they use to describe this person over here versus how they describe, Bob over here? So we can all do small things. We can ask one another, are we truly being open-minded? Are we being inclusive? Are we really living by the cardinal rule, treating others as you wish to be treated? And those small things in the aggregate, will help to make a bigger difference than the performative statements coming from any corporation.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise, Joe. Have a good one, man.